Good evening, everyone. The Mingle, basically, it's an initiative of WCA, Writers West Africa Foundation, and African Writers Development Trust. Because we have to discuss and see how far we can go with it before we meet tomorrow again at the University of Dar es Salaam. So in this Mingle, we'll have panelists who are made of creatives from various African nationalities, irrespective of the residencies. The guys here, they're our panelists. So basically, this Mingle is an opportunity for interactive discussion on themes relevant to the African literary scene, and also it serves as a springboard for networking and capacity building. So we are going to network and build our capacities. I think that sounds good, yeah? Right. So as how we know, the theme for this discussion today will be African literature as a vehicle for cultural renaissance. I think it's here. That's our theme today. And this is in line with goal number 16 of the African Union's 2063 agenda. So without wasting your time, as we see, we'll have 6 panelists and 1 moderator. I would like to introduce one after another. So we start our discussion. We have Charlotte Makala. She's a copywriter, voice-over artist, and author who is based in Dar es Salaam. And she has American experience. I think we'll know more about American experience and how it's related to this. And also, she has published The Color of Promise, which is an anthology of poetry and short stories, which is meant to celebrate femininity and Black experience, which this is found on Amazon. And I think, and the physical, I think you brought some copies here, right? Yes. That was marketing. Okay. The second is Aisha Said Kingu. She's a lawyer and also a poetess who has recently launched her poetry book, Poetry Rebirth. It was launched in 2020. So I think some of us were lucky enough to have seen that and maybe bought and read, not just bought. Okay? So Aisha has managed to deliver her poems to different famous people, like His Excellency Dr. Jakaya Kikwete, His Excellency Vladimir Putin, the President of Russia, and the Queen of England, Elizabeth Alexandra. Is that amazing? It's really amazing. There is more about her, but because of time, I go to the third panelist, Malama Katurende. He's a Zambian author, poet, and thinker. Can you think about that? Thinker. His poems first appeared in the anthology titled Under African Skies, Poetry from Zambia in 2001. 2001. Okay. His novel, he has also a novel called Bitterness, and also he won 2006 Julius Chongo Best Creative Writer in 2005. Malama has published over 60 articles for overseas publication on anthropology, philosophy, politics, aesthetics, astrophysics, and mathematics. Over 60. Did I mention mathematics? Yes. Okay. I know some people have troubles with mathematics. There's more as well, but we're trying to go with time, okay? Next is Nilam Babul. Nilam is a lawyer and columnist for the Citizen newspaper, and she's responsible for the review section, published every Friday of the week. So I think many of us might have heard of that and read what she does. It's really good. So she founded and created the Africa Reads page on Instagram, reviewing books she has read. Actually, she reviewed my book as well. This one. Thank you, Neil. Sorry. Someone is lost there, and I don't know how to do it again. So we have another panelist who is Mwinula Kingamkono. He's a digital innovator and writer. Just that. Digital. Do you need more on that? We know, right? Yes. And then we have the last panelist, who is Mkuki Goya. He's a publisher. Mkuki Nanyota Publishers. They published this book and many books. So I think his works just elaborate more about him. So apart from the panelists, we'll have our moderator who will be running this show. And he is Anton Onuba. So Anton is a Nigerian writer, editor, and founder of Writers Space Africa and Writers Development Trust. And also, he's currently the vice chairman of the Association of Nigerian Authors and the Abuja chapter. He has authored 7 books, including this, Amanda's Choir. 7 books. I couldn't carry them here. Because they're huge. So to save time, let me welcome the director of Française. So, yes. The name, you know.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I'm very impressed. I'm Florent Valeur, the director of Writers Française. And when I listen to all the bio and the story, yeah. So welcome, everyone. I'm very glad to host you today. And very welcome at Writers Française. We have all started our cultural programming. You can have a look to a very nice exhibition downstairs from Safina Kimbotoka. No, I'm not saying it well. Kimbokota. And Heltayed Dawel Bait, who is Sudanese. You can have a look. And after, and this evening we'll have also a really, really nice concert. It's an Italian singer with the music producer, and they were on residency in Zanzibar, so it's a house tarab, like house music with tarab music, and it's a very, very beautiful concert. I'm just very welcome to everyone, and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director of Writers Française. Now it's time that we start a wide discussion on the African literature as a vehicle for cultural renaissance. Please, Mr. Anton Onuba, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. As introduced, my name is Anthony Onuba. I'll be the moderator here for the next probably about 60, 70 minutes. Somebody whispered that it's too short the time, but I mean, we need to wrap up a bit and get ready for the big day tomorrow. So it's simple. What we do, this is the 4th edition of the Mingle. We started the Mingle in 2019. The first edition was in Kenya at Strathmore University. The second was also in Kenya. The third was last year in Zambia. Coincidentally at Française 2 in Zambia. And this is the 4th here. Next year we'll have the 5th, also with the African Writers Conference. So the essence, as explained already by Mbacha, is for us to discuss. There is no right or wrong answer. It's just perspective. Everything is perspective. Okay. Everything is perspective. So we just ask a few questions, they discuss, and then after that we open it up for questions from the audience. And then we call it a day. So are we ready? Okay. It's not a quiz anyway. So also to the panelists, unfortunately, I have to apologize. We have just one microphone. So if you want to speak, you just indicate the microphone will pass on to you. But the first question is going to be random. Of course, our theme is African literature as a vehicle for cultural renaissance. So I think the most important starting point is, what exactly is African literature? Because the debate has been on, is African literature written by Africans about anywhere, or literature written by anyone about Africa? What exactly is African literature? And from the bios, you can see that they're all experienced in different fields. I mean, Malama has been writing for probably over 2 decades, and all that. You know a lot of people here. So let's hear from them, from their perspective. What exactly is African literature? What do you think it is?
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Not to take much of your time. The last time I was in Dar es Salaam was 10 years ago, so I'm very happy that I'm back home because I went to Zanzibar, and it's great to see this happy audience. Now, Anthony, to discuss the theme, I take African literature as any creative writing that is produced by anybody about Africa, irrespective of who they are. We can have different examples of, for instance, American-born authors that might have lived and experienced African cultures and social spaces that would express those spaces and cultural mindsets into written texts. And so I would say that anything written about Africa, whether it is a Russian or anybody from any other place, would, in my view, be called African literature. Thank you.
Thank you. This is just my personal opinion, not the publishing house's position, right? I think African literature, once we've called it African literature, I think primarily has to be practiced by people who identify as Africans. It's a literature that preoccupies itself with narratives and experiences and identity of people of the African descent. Now, they could be in the diaspora outside Africa, they could be within Africa, but I think for it to be African literature, I think those are things that have to be part of the ingredients of that literature, because I think different people from different parts have different experiences and they have a different way of dealing with those experiences and talking and writing and expressing those experiences. And I think those experiences being African, or that sort of condition being African, then I think it can only be articulated or expressed, from an artistic point of view of an African. Yeah, so I think when we talk about literature as a whole, then we can open it up. But when we talk about American literature, Russian literature, I think then you kind of already sort of specified it to a kind of Yeah, thanks.
Not very far from what they said, but I would also say that it's a collective of, words that speak of African culture, the norms, the lifestyle of the African people. It doesn't matter where they are, but as long as they speak or praise about their being, from the time, we could see from the colonial time, after what happened, all that stuff. So the artistic perspective or views that praises or elaborates or explains about the Africans is all that explains about the African, by the African authors. It doesn't matter where.
I would take a broader perspective and say African literature would include both books written by African authors as well as those from other countries. I like to take a broader perspective because Africa is a large continent. I believe there is so much to learn about Africa, the vibrant culture, the norms, the community, the society itself. So I would prefer to take a broader perspective and say it includes everything, whether it's someone in another country writing about Africa or whether it's Africans writing about Africa.
I think I'm not too far from where Nilam was coming from. For me, it definitely encompasses two things. I would say that African literature is both setting and identity, and for me those things come together because I do believe that even if someone does not identify as an African, however, if their literature is set in Africa, then to me it is African literature. And then again, vice versa, if someone identifies as an African, however their setting may not be in Africa, then I still consider that African literature because of how they identify themselves. So that's where I stand with that.
No comment. Yeah, because it's pretty much the same.
Yeah. Okay, you're not far from what they said as well. Okay. Well, it's very interesting, really. I mean, listening to their perspective on African literature. But one of the questions that came into my mind at this point is, I mean, why African literature? Why should we really read African literature? Why should we promote African literature? Why? Because we need to understand the why. So why exactly? Anyone can?
I'm Winola. Why would go back to ownership? Why African literature is because a young man from Dar es Salaam wants to say, hey, the current Nobel Prize winner is Tanzanian. I want to be able to say that, regardless of the politics behind it. So the why for me is to be able to own it. Like take my T-shirt for example. What if we had a Tanzanian space program and I'll be wearing it? So that sense of ownership is the why. Why African literature? Because we need to tell our stories. We need to tell our narratives. We need to be able to say from our point of view how we see the world. Not that people are calling us poor, but maybe we define worth differently. You know what I mean? So for me, it would be African literature because ownership. That's very important for me. Yeah.
Yeah, one of my next books that I'm publishing next year is titled No Other Land. It is a novel based on my life as an artist for the last 2 decades. It is essentially about expressing myself, not as a creative writer, but as a person who is engaged in sculptures, like sculptures, Yeah. So I have studied sculptures for the last 6 years or 7 years or so. The reason I'm talking about sculptures is because sculptures illustrate how very different we are as Africans. Every individual or every society evolves over time, and they create their own values and their systems and their mindsets and the way they think. And so for Africans, we do have a unique way of thinking. And from the point of view of the book that I'm publishing next year, in sculptures, that way of thinking is most significantly expressed in sculptures as Africans. It's extremely unique. And therefore, if you look at the entire landscape of art, or who we are as a people, we cannot afford to lose that, because our values and our cultures constitutes a knowledge economy, so to speak. We have that knowledge that has to be passed on from generation to generation. How people hunted, how people told their own stories, how people built their own houses. I'm also interested in architecture. I was reading the other day about some Germans who are trying to use architectural designs of Africans into modern architectural design. And that is very important. Our way of doing things, our ideas, our culture in terms of mathematics, physics, and everything is of extreme value, not just to us, but to the future generations. And so this is why African culture matters, because it's within the scope and the depth of African culture that we can get something out and pass it on. Lastly, on this score, I'm also publishing another book titled Thorns in My Heart. This is based on Zambian myths or mythologies about love. I'm not just going to retell those stories, old stories about love, but I'm going to recreate them a bit more like mythical Greek stories, you know, like you weave them and try to use a bit of some physics, some mathematics to come up with something which is totally new, but not so different from something that my people who are Zambian, or my tribe, who are Bemba, have experienced in the past. So this is what I would like to pass on to a generation of Zambians and also a generation of Africans who will read my books. So it's very important as Africans to dig into our past, get the culture, and use that culture to create other forms of art or other things. Thank you.
Okay, no, just hold the mic a little. We'll get back to you, but just on that question.
Right.
When you talked about our way of thinking, does it restrict us in any way? The reason is because there are lots of people who have refused to accept Afrofuturism as part of African literature. So if you write about going back in time, flying to space, superheroes, blah, 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 a lot of people still say, no, this is not African literature. So does it restrict us in any way?
Yeah, well, as a matter of fact, African literature does exist because fundamentally Africans have been telling their own stories. The only difference perhaps is that those stories have been textualized, and so African literature does exist. I can give a simple example. In the northwestern part of my country, Zambia, there are tribal groupings called the Lovale Lunda, who told stories that are called Sona or Lisona. Lisona are a way of expressing stories in terms of identities. Like I was looking at this, like flowers or like images multiplying themselves indefinitely, forwards and backwards. So that's the way of doing our stories. Now, there were some Germans who came to Zambia and they did their research and they created a mathematics out of our stories. And that mathematics has been applied to computer programming. So you may read about Isona in Zambia. And therefore, it's very important for us to go back into the past and see what we have and try to recreate a value which is already there, or to expose that value for everyone to appreciate and to see. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question. Okay, thanks.
No, I think why African literature? That was the first question, right? I think because we have the world will be poorer than it already is if we didn't give it these stories. The world, I think, is poorer as it is, simply because our stories aren't told enough, aren't told from our perspective, and as a result, there's only one way of looking at the world. There's only one way of being. So that is actually the fundamental reason why we should have an African literature, or why should writers from Africa write and share with the world and get translated into languages of the world. Even though I'm an advocate of writing in one's language, but also I think we should be translated so that the world can be able to access this knowledge. So I think that is just a very important thing. But also I think it can also correct some of the ills of the past. You know, we all know our experience as Africans across the continent. And I think because our voices have been suppressed for so long, or have been retold by other people's voices, it is our duty to correct that. But when we go to African futurism, science fiction, etc., first of all, nobody owns sci-fi, you know? I mean, nobody owns imagination, you know? I mean, how can somebody say that African, you know, maybe sci-fi is not African? Science is colorless, science is nationless, you know, and nobody truly can claim to own it. And I think we're having these discussions simply because we've attributed certain aspects of technology or quote-unquote progress, or the definition of progress, or the definition of even this idea of science. We already see it from a Western lens, or attribute it as a kind of Western invention. Westerners didn't invent science, you know. So I think I forgot your original question as to why African. No. I think the sci-fi part.
Yes,
you said it's not African. No. If it is African futurism.
No, I was saying that, you know, there's this argument. I like to argue a lot anyway.
Of course.
About it not being African. Because, and again, coming to the point that you mentioned about us giving to the world, because the world will be incomplete without our stories. A lot of the time, there is also this argument that we contribute to the problem. For example, you pick up a novel, love, poverty, hunger, and then the American dream. The person flies out of the country or whatever, and then the person makes it big there and comes back home, takes the family out of poverty. The same stories all over and over again. So that's part of what foils this school of thought. That since Africa, in quote, is a place of poverty and everybody wants the visa lottery and stuff, probably we should not be talking about technology. Probably we should be talking about the many problems that we have, and probably we should address it. This is just another...
Okay, I think, so you're saying that all writers should be preoccupied with maybe decolonization, not your, it may not be your opinion, maybe not your opinion, but you're saying this argument basically says we should be preoccupied, let's preoccupied with correcting the past, before we start imagining the future. First of all, I mean, any artist in here doesn't want to be told what to do. If you're an artist, you don't want to be told what to write and what not to write. You know, that's nobody's job but yours. But I think it continues this idea that we're kind of stuck. We are a fluid people. We are a fluid culture. We are an evolving culture, and we're dealing with contemporary issues, and we're dealing with future issues, just like every other culture does. So to sit there and tell somebody to not write about, or to not imagine a future and sort of edit black people or African people out of the future, I mean, where does that even begin? Are you saying we shouldn't imagine ourselves in this idea of a future? You know, so I think it raises all these other issues as well. But yeah, I mean, my position is, I mean, if you're a writer, just write whatever moves you or burns your heart, you know. Yeah.
So Aisha.
Okay, as for me, why African culture? I think I would refer the question generally to why art. As for me, I refer art as life, and if it's life, it's a journey. It takes me back, it makes me get into the present, but it also makes me imagine or picture of the future. So with the African, literature, I would be able to go back, what happened back there, or what is my story, or what was the history back then, what is happening in the present, and what is to be of the future. So I would refer it as, the whole path. It gives clarity as to where you're coming from, where you are, and where you're about to go. So it's that way for me.
So why African literature? I've asked this question since I was a kid, because my mom would bring books, or the libraries I would go to wouldn't have books by Tanzanian authors or African authors. And I asked my mom, like, where is a book written by a Tanzanian author or an African author? So since I was a kid, I asked myself this question, and now I ask myself, why not? There are so many writers in Tanzania, there are so many writers in Africa, so why aren't we talking about them? Why aren't we bringing their work forward? There is so much I've learned from Tanzanian authors, from African authors. We all want to read about the place we grew up in, the culture we grew up in, the diversity we've seen, the growth we've seen, the changes we're seeing. So African literature has to be recognized, and it starts with us. So that is why I said I have a platform of bringing reviews out. So I need to bring Tanzanian authors on the forefront. I need to bring African authors so their works are recognized. Because even if you go in school, there's very few African books that you read. And even teachers encourage you to read books by Western authors or other authors. And what about the place I grew up in? I want to read about a story in Dar es Salaam about a girl like me. I want to read about the culture I experienced, the friends I made. So yeah, it's a sense of pride, it's a sense of achievement. We're progressing ahead, and the world needs to recognize African literature. That is my opinion.
So to answer the question why, I'm very much a believer of the power of voices. So I believe that everybody in here has their own individual perspective of the world. So when it comes to how we see the world, I feel like that should also be reflected in the things that we read and what we're seeing, just like what you talked about, Salaam, just like the world. We should also have the world that we perceive be reflected back. And I feel also that at this time there's an equal playing field with the internet right now, where people who didn't have platforms before can create one of their own. So this, for me, is a big, reason for why not you have a platform. Before, maybe you didn't have platforms like Instagram, Facebook, social media to just publish your work freely. And so now that those sort of platforms exist, so with that, I really feel like this is the time to move forward. This is the time for other voices to be heard. And I think one of my favorite African authors, and maybe some of you guys in here as well, her name is Chimamanda Adichie from Nigeria. Yes, so she talks in one of her TED Talks about the danger of a single story. So for a long time, I feel like because of these systems of power, there has been a Western voice that has been very powerful, very dominant, very heard. And so now, like I said, with the internet and with other platforms arising, there's more of an equal platform that is coming about. And so perhaps what we may have seen before, especially in the Western world, was an African story told by non-Africans, or maybe a single story, which, we were talking about, like poverty, perhaps. That is the only thing that is, reflected in African literature. However, that's not true. That is not true. And so now, with these equal playing fields, I feel like this is the time to move forward and to talk about different things. And, we are artists, we are writers. So whatever it is that we feel is in our heart, in our passion, or whatever we're seeing in our world, it's a time to write about that. And I think most of all, it's important because it matters. And that's it. It matters. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, when she's talked about voices, I remember she's a voiceover artist. So voices, you always uses. I mean, you always use people's voices, as far as your career is concerned. But there was one thing you talked about how unrestricted we are to write, because of course we have a lot of platforms now. But what is the role of prize money, awards and all, with all the restrictions of the awards in literature? Because a lot of the time, people write for money. But doesn't that influence the content of the work? Does that influence the African culture itself?
I think it definitely does. So I used to be one of the people that you were talking about. There's been plenty of times in my own life, and I've tried to write. Unfortunately, I've never received prize money for writing. I know with Lubacha it's different. He's received,
Lubacha is different.
Yeah, he has a different story. Yeah. So, but I have never received prize money. And I do remember when I was entering these competitions, I would influence my writing to help me win, because I did, and I limited myself from writing the truth or what I really felt. I just looked at, okay, what could get me to win? So I was thinking in terms of strategy to help me to win. For me, I wouldn't say that it was really financial or monetary. I think I was seeking the title more so. And so I now realize in hindsight that the fault was in feeling like I needed that. I do believe even for those who are looking to write for money, there are other ways to go about it and still be authentic to yourself as an artist, as a writer. It's not just you. There's prize money, but there's also other things. Yeah, so that's what I've come to learn.
Okay. So to publishing, what do you have any specific criteria for selecting works to publish? Because I mean, there are some publishers, I mean, you know, that have those selected criteria. Can you talk a bit about it?
You've segued from prize money to publishing. Well, I mean, I think different books, it's very hard to subscribe or to ascribe a criteria. If I speak from a Tanzanian publisher's experience, because not just generally, because obviously publishing houses sometimes find that they have a kind of particular book they typically publish, partly because maybe it's the kind of the internal capacity, you know, if it's an editorial group within the house that is very much leaning towards a kind of creative writing, then you will likely find that a lot of writers would submit manuscripts. If it's a scholarly publishing house, same, etc. And the criteria for Tanzania, typically publishers, you know, do a wide range of books. So it's hard to subscribe a particular set of checklists to go through. However, for Mkuki na Nyota at least, relevance is very important. So a manuscript that comes in, let's say if it's a work of fiction, then relevance to Tanzania is important for us. You know, now you can debate whether how do you decide what is relevant and not, and at some point somebody has to make a decision. But relevance is important. Craft is very, very important. So basically the talent, the quality of writing, you know, the clarity of the voice that's within the, you know, the author's voice or the character's voice, etc. But of course, those are sort of preliminaries. But a manuscript going through a publishing house, there's a lot of back and forth to get it to a point where both the author and the publisher are quite happy with the work. But I think also an often overlooked, and maybe we don't like to talk about it, but I think a publisher can probably say it, does this book have an audience, right? And also, ideally, you know, from just purely a survival reason, does this have an audience that is willing to buy that work? You know, because ultimately at some point somebody will have to pay for that book to be in people's hands. You know, whether it's in digital format or in print format. So that is also an important criteria. Is this something we can confidently market, and hopefully that investment can somewhat be recouped? You know, for both our sakes, the author and the publisher. So those are sort of the general, I think, things that publishers will look at. Yeah. So if I may comment a little bit on this prize question. I think prizes are great from a point of view of work being maybe judged or or considered or critiqued by peers. You know, so from a craft point of view, they're great. However, there's a danger sometimes where writers would write, like you mentioned, you'd use a fantastic word, strategically. And I think any art, once it becomes a tool for some strategic outcome or for a particular goal, and then the work then becomes just a little device, you know, a little gimmick to get you to winning money or winning fame. And I think the work will suffer, would likely suffer. Not necessarily, but will likely suffer, because that authenticity that has been looked at could actually be lost. Yeah, Santi.
Okay. So permit me to bring Lubacha in. Okay.
I think when it comes to prizes or winning awards, it serves as an incentive, but that shouldn't be the sole purpose of writing, because there's so many books that don't win awards, but they touch lives. Yes. They touch your soul, they call out to you. So I think for a writer, it's not about winning an award or winning a certain sum of money. It's about the lives you touch. It's about that one person who read your book and it changed their life. And there's so many books I've read by Tanzanian authors, by African authors. Maybe they didn't win awards, but they changed my life. They spoke to my heart. So I think that is the best achievement for a writer. It's getting that feeling of having a writer talk about what you've experienced and then putting it out in words. So it's that one life you touch that I think is the best thing that could happen to a writer or an author.
Okay, so Lubacha, we are privileged to have you because you have published and you have won prize money. So tell us about it. Tell us a little bit about it. Are you fulfilled? Do you have that sense of fulfillment, or is there more to it?
Okay. I think the idea of winning an award is just a sort of recognition, but the sole purpose of a writer is to make sure that you touch a life, change something in that life. The moment when you write because you want to win, then you become selfish, in my opinion. So for me, I wrote first, and then the award came later. Thank you.
Okay, we're almost done. Just one more round, and then we'll come to the questions. So just one more round. I know a lot of people have questions. Now, yeah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to share the Zambian experience. When I first published my collection of poetry in Under the African Skies in 2003, actually I didn't win anything. There were no royalties, absolutely nothing. And then 2 years later, I was lucky. My novel Bitterness was accepted by three publishers in South Africa and the UK and America, but I went with the American. The following year, I won an award. That was awesome because they gave me some money. But for Bitterness, it took me 7 years to write the book. And during that time, I sacrificed everything because I was doing my third year at the University of Zambia. So because I was split between writing the novel and also class. So I asked the Senate to give me permission to go and finish my book and then come back and continue with my studies. They said no at first, but after a lot of pressing, they agreed and they gave me permission. So I went away for about 5 years. Having only gone as far as the third year, I completed my book. I knew it was a very important book, but at no time did I think that I was going to win money out of the book. I think I just wanted to tell an important story that would affect Zambians and Africans. And after I'd finished my book, I went back to the university. They accepted me back. I finished my studies. And 1 year later, of course, I won this award and my book has been used in American universities as a textbook. And so, but what has happened is that this book, I never thought of money. Well, when I write, I don't think of money. I just write what I like. But it's the consequence of work, the value of when you do some good work, people appreciate and people are willing to pay for it. But not because I wanted money out of it. I don't think about it. So I get, every so often I get royalties for my books, and that's a good thing. But kids or young people that I'm mentoring in my country, I tell them, if you really want to become a writer, don't become a writer because you want to make money, because you are not likely going to make money. But maybe you might make networks. I've gone to different continents because of my books. I never thought that I would go to Latin America, go to Brazil, but I was invited. They paid for everything. They lodged me in a very posh hotel. And this particular trip, I didn't pay anything. There were some other people who paid for it. So that's awesome, you know. But it's a bonus because you've written something that people appreciate for what it is. So that's my experience.
Okay. I think that listening to his story, listening to everything that has been said, one thing for me is clear, write, because you have a story to tell. So you write, of course money is important, yes, but you still write first before the money comes. And then there are a lot of people who are able to go far with their literature. There are a lot of people who, just that story, that thing that they have, can take them very, very far. And then to end this all, we talk about culture. How much of our culture should be in literature? Should we deliberately write about cultural places because we want to sell our culture? Or should we just write, just write and maybe include one or two things? Maybe the pots, the way people cook, or the way people raise kids or something. What do you think about how we should write our culture and literature?
Go all the way. Go all the way. Yeah, because first of all, as Africa, our culture is very diverse. That's the very first thing. Because, and I wanted to talk about sci-fi for a while, obviously. Because there's this thinking that, you know, Africa, when it comes to science, like, we didn't do a lot. But then, if you watch most movies about aliens, happen in Egypt. Where's Egypt? In Africa. So if somebody else, an outsider, can look at my continent and then see some story, you know, like, oh yeah, these guys, give them vibranium, whatever that is, and then make them an advanced community, yeah? And so these are outsiders. They're telling our stories. So for me, if we're about to write about African culture, I would say go all the way. Talk about, you know, Kizomba, the dancing. Did I get it right? I don't dance. Yeah, that's African culture, right? Write about that. We have so many ways, or like if you look at Rwanda, for example, I saw pictures on how the men are cutting their hair. It's so cool. Let's write about that, all of that. There's so many other things. Our music is very powerful. This is our culture. Part of it is a way of life. So for me, going back to the first point about science fiction and culture, we have a lot. We have so many stories. I'll give you one example. Anybody familiar with Shingwengwe? You know them? Masala Kulangwa? Anybody? Yeah? These are Sukuma stories. I heard them when I was growing up. This is mythology. Shingwengwe is Hulk. No, if you think about it, when you read it, Shingwengwe, this very powerful creature that existed in Sukuma, like, you know, back in the day in Sukuma, like he stepped on a rock, he left a mark on a rock. This is Hulk. So it's just how we are packaging our stories. Masala Kulango is a mythology about a monster. If our kids can consume Harry Potter, why not Masala Kulango? So let's write about these stories. And I don't have a kid. I don't know why I said our kids. That's the futuristic stuff, yeah? But going back on a serious note, all these stories, because it's really about how you package your stories. But because, I mean, if I ask a question, is witchcraft good? Is witchcraft good? Really? You're Nigerian. I didn't. I was expecting a no from the audience. But again, these are the stories that are being told in like Harry Potter, all these stories, like stuff in Star Wars, for example. It's not even there. Nobody saw these monsters, but somebody thought about them. So when it comes to our culture, let's write these stories. I believe there's so many other stories that I've never heard of, like about monsters and mythology, because it's really about how we package them. Find a nice superhero, because I believe so many kids want to relate to that. They want to see an African superhero. And I think this is why some people really loved the Black Panther, because it spoke to them, like it felt familiar. So go all the way, like no limits. Talk about everything, all of our culture, our food, our music, how we talk, whatever, everything. So for me, it would be that. Thanks.
I believe we should write about anything and everything that we can. From the type of clothes we wear, the fabrics we use, the small things that we do, vegetable vendors wandering from one house to another, that is a story in itself. We don't need to confine ourselves to what others are writing or what authors from other countries are writing. We need to go all the way and write about anything and everything.
But I also think that whenever an African author puts something down, there is an identity. You can always tell that, there is something about this. So it cannot, maybe sometimes it cannot go to the words, but probably the cover. There must be something that identifies that this is from home. Yeah.
I wanted to add to Aisha's point. I feel like whether we choose to write about it or not, it will come out. Because like I said before, if you're writing and it's part of the setting, something is bound to show up, like you can't just write about the streets and then, oh, dala dala, like something will come up because those things don't exist in other places. It's very unique to us. And then as well with identity, there's times when I've written things, not yet published, but anyways, there's things that come up, like for example, sucking of the teeth, like when someone's angry and you're that is us. And so I remember particularly one time I was writing a script and I was like, how do I write this? And so the thing is, and it wasn't even set here. So my point is that it will come up. It will come up whether we want to or not. And then you were talking about if we should sell our culture. I feel like, I know this is not what you meant, but of course the culture is not for sale. However, it will come up. That's what I strongly believe, that it will come up because it's part of your identity, or something about the setting is going to be so unique to this part of the world that it's bound to arise and people will understand, this is from Africa, this is an African writer. Yeah.
This amazing contribution. I wanted to kind of take a little note to writers, particularly when you're working on your book or whatever it is that you're writing, to also or to caution that I think when you embark on writing an African story, it's you sort of corner yourself into trying to make it fit this idea of Africa, because you're not contributing to something new, but you're trying to fit into a mold. And I think that any creative, actually, not just writers. I mean, if you're in the visual arts, etc., you're making films, I think you trying to. The most important thing is to try to be true to the story you're trying to tell. So if it's sci-fi, make it believable. Make me truly believe something that hasn't been invented. If it's mythology worked very well. You know, all of us have, you know, growing up, we had all sorts of fantastical stories, and they're very believable because they weren't really forced. Nobody was trying to sell you a story. Your grandma was not selling you a story. You know, they were telling a story, they were singing, everything about it was so believable because it just felt real, because it was inspired by your reality. And I think that is something we should constantly have as in the creative space. We should always have these conversations because I think it's important. I would touch a little bit on, for example, this is kind of related to, for example, in Tanzania, where we find that a lot of writers think, oh, you know, I have to write in English, you know, because that validates my story, you know. So they're already adding this thing, you know, that this mold they want to work with. But is your voice going to be heard through that language? You know, I'm not talking about mastery of language, being good in, you know, the technicality of the language, but can you truly tell, like you were saying, you know, even when we describe it as sucking your teeth, doesn't truly capture it, really. Like, like if in Kiswahili we say kufyonza or kusonya, right? Like, sucking your teeth isn't really, truly kusonya, right? Like, it's if you write it in Kiswahili, we get it. We get it at the deepest level. But when you say he sucked his teeth, you know, at her, it's Alimsonia is like, whoa, okay, some drama is about to impact. You know what I'm saying? So like, just use the tools that your culture gave you and tell the best story you can tell, and then we'll translate it into English or whatever and try the best way if you need to. But first, work with the tools you've been given, your birth-given tools or God-given tools. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We're now coming to the audience for the questions.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the contribution. Should I stand up? I don't think it's a classroom because the discussant and the panelists were all seated down. I have an issue with the title of African literature. However, the panelists did a good job to pull me out of that thought. And I think it's important, as Mkuki put it very relevant, there's no translation that comes out into English into the Kiswahili context. Kusonya, Kungonga. We cannot translate that. It's impossible. And the art of work that is superior to compared to what? I think that's the job that every person who is interested in writing or trying to penetrate in the platform of expression has to start somewhere. And I think the most important thing is really to be able to, right now I think this forum as it stands should really fight to step out of this comparison and contrast that somebody should write like Shakespeare or like because Shakespeare is classical, is it? And the more we move forward into the future, we also find out Shakespeare was a fake person. So like for years we are struggling to put ourselves from a perspective that actually is fictional. And even myself, my favorite writer, I came to discover very much later, he wrote a lot of fiction, but he made it into literary. I mean, he's a German, but he wrote a lot of lies only by reading newspapers. So we need actually to, first of all, to find a way to create a fan base of being able to express, to allow people to express themselves, not in the view of African literature, but in our own way that is close to us and we feel comfortable to express ourselves without being, leave out censorship, leave out propaganda. We just need to come out and be comfortable to say what we have to say. Can I drop the mic?
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you very much to the panelists. very interesting talk, but I have to go back to the money part. I feel like it was glazed over. Like, shouldn't writers also eat? I mean, if we just write because we have a story to tell, there has to be a value in it. So whether it's from the community or from somebody else, there has to be some value to it. But if we as writers think, I don't know, try to say something like, oh, you know, we have to write because we have a story, not because of money. We have to get paid too. I don't want this starvation thing to get into the next generation. Like, we struggle so much to be valued as writers for our work. People expect us to do something for exposure, for nonsense. But how are we supposed to live as writers? And I want to hear from you guys in the panel more about money, because I felt like you just sort of like, you know, passed it through, but we really, we need the money. If you want to see my face, this is the face of a writer who really wants to get paid.
First of all, thank you so much for your question. I completely understand the struggle. The struggle is real. And so when it comes to writing, I think one of the first things we have to understand is that it is an art form. It is a form of expression. I understand that we want to get paid and we want all our work to have value, but at the same time, I'm of the belief that we have to work our way there. And so, you know, we all have our own stories, but Malama, you were saying that you were in school and then you asked for permission. You know, for some of us, we have other jobs, like we're working, and so it's down to strategy of finding a way to make your art work for you. In the beginning, you'll have to make compromises on being a full-time writer. Some people are very comfortable with that, and they're okay going into it full-time and knowing the risks. So I would say be strategic, know the risks, make decisions based on knowing that, you know, if I do this, this, and this is the outcome. So in the beginning, if you are a full-time writer, the truth is that you may not have that initial recognition. However, if you persist with it, or even if you have a plan where you are going to a 9-to-5 or you have another source of income and then you're writing on the side, you don't have to starve. I also don't believe in the starving artist. You don't have to starve, and it's down to you to figure out a plan to make sure that you are not starving. And for those of you who are starving, please don't.
Good evening.
Maybe can I share my experience?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that the question that you raised about money is very critical, because everyone needs to survive. You have to pay for bills, accommodation, for clothing, for putting food on your table. I last stopped working formally for the ministry because I'm a teacher by profession, mathematics. That is in 2003. That was 2 years before my book, Bitterness, was published in New York. Since that time, I've not worked for anybody. The way I survive is this. First of all, I, over the years, have consistently tried to create my personal platform as Malama Katulwende, who is a writer, who is known overseas and also locally in Zambia, and maybe, should I say, Southern Africa. It's when you create your own brand that you begin to monetize that brand. By monetizing, meaning, at this time, I get jobs. I have a company, I've created a company called Thornbird. Thornbird is an editing and publishing platform. We are based in Osaka. I have employed people who are editors and graphic designers and so on and so forth. So, because of my experience and my publications, I've created this powerful brand which draws people to me. I've done work for the government in the military. They have given me work to do, which is literary or research. And just a couple of days ago, I won an award not an award, but a business deal to write about, I think the only living veteran journalist who has been practicing for 50 years. That should be about, I'm sorry to tell about the money. It's, I think the price tag is about 357,000 kwacha, which is about 5,000, maybe about $6,000. So it's going to take me about 4 months to do that job. I have different kinds of jobs. People give me work based on my brand. So to answer your question specifically, first of all, create yourself. Create yourself as that author. At the beginning, it's going to be hard, very, very hard. You'll probably not have anyone to, you will not support yourself. Maybe you live on smaller jobs, but focus on the bigger picture, which is your brand as an author who's going to be known in Tanzania and different countries in East Africa. And then after that, then you are going to monetize your brand on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and other platforms. So like at the moment, I think I have another deal to go to South Africa. I'll not pay for it. Someone else is going to pay for it. And at this time, I'm able to set my price. So if somebody wants me to do the job, I will refuse. I say, no, I cannot do this for this price. I set my price. To give another example, there is a Zambian author who won, her name is Namwali Sepo. Last year, she won a very, very big, probably the biggest prize. That was about 270,000 US dollars. She lives in the US, but she's Zambian. She sets her own price because she has created a brand. So create your brand and everything else will come your way. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. As you might have guessed, my background is in technology. This is just an advice, yeah? Use tech. It's, how do I put it? Because right now, technology gives you the ability to, first of all, reach audiences that you couldn't with a physical copy of a published book. So use technology. If you're a good storyteller, publish on Medium, for example. Medium is paying publishers. I used to run a WordPress page. Like I think that was around the time me and Cookie met, and I was still in college, and I had a few ads out of like 1,000 views, and it wasn't much. I wasn't like really serious about it, but it was something. So I would say use technology, but also there are other platforms like freelancer.com. They are paying writers, and the cool thing about that, you can work from anywhere. So there are so many other alternatives as a writer for you to make money, not just to be published. So for me, it would be use that, and I say this because I made money out of these platforms, not too much, but it's something. So, but it's something. So I would say try to use technology as well.
I wanted to touch on that as well. I think that you hear a lot about if you want to make money, don't be a writer, but really by extension, don't be an artist. Yeah, like you. I think if you're an artist, you've heard that. But often it's not necessarily always informed by simply this being a job, like any other job. It's also the kind of thing you are told because essentially what the people are saying is concentrate on your art, concentrate on your craft, and the money will come. And yeah, that sounds like some kind of money, you know, but I'm saying he didn't reach this level, you know, of success in terms of sort of international recognition, etc. And there's so many other writers, even there's some local writers as well with the same trajectory, and other artists for that matter. So you can be lucky, yes, you can make money on your first piece, on your first book, you know, you can make money on a self-published book. There have been books which were self-published and then they were picked up by traditional publishers and just had massive distribution, and, you know, even I think Harry Potter, you know, is a good example of books that didn't really quite hit it in the beginning. So I think if you're an artist, your major preoccupation, I think, and here I'm speaking as a creative, not really as a publisher. If you're an artist, you should first and foremost put your energies on your craft, yeah, and then use that use that work to then create the kind of value you think that work has. And demand that value, yes. But also be prepared for disappointments if people don't see that value. You know, I think being an artist, part of it is also accepting that not everybody is ready for your greatness, right? You know, not everybody is gonna, you know, so you have to also be able to accept that. You know, rejection and all of these things are part of being a creative. And I think you have to be able to balance the two aside.
So we're taking one more question. After that, remember this is a mingle. You can mingle afterwards. Yeah, just one more question, and then Lubacha will come back here. Yeah.
Thank you, and congratulations to all of you on your remarkable careers, achievements. I am just starting out in terms of, I have started sharing my writing. It's been 2-3 years that I started doing that, and I've been getting encouragement. I have a problem though, because I tend towards protest writing. So political commentary, poetry, that tends to talk of, you know, what is happening. So I get a lot of requests from concerned people to censor myself. Please, 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 we still live in this country, etc., etc. Can you not? So my question in particular to Kuki, he's smiling, and others who are familiar with our recent experience with regards to that kind of writing, is there appetite? You know, should I keep taking the risk myself? Because I do use technology and we have laws against certain things. It seems to me the only creatives that have license are the cartoonists at this point, and I think that's you know, that space could shrink. So if you could talk a little bit about that, because we write in code, but we want to tell the story, and it's the story of what's happening today. Thank you.
I think anybody writing the truth is going to have some people who are going to be made uncomfortable by that truth, and yes, there will be people who will attempt to censor you, but a little known fact is you can get away with writing a lot if you write in mediums which are not yet being seen as a threat. I think if you write on social media and you have enough of a reach to where some toes are being stepped on, then you'll get some of that pushback. And I think that's a very public forum. But unfortunately now, if you write books, you can say a lot of things. And trust me, if people were going to, maybe I should encourage ideas, any ideas to go and start reading some of the material that is written, you'll be surprised. I think you can write, if you can figure out a way to write your poetry in book format, and then figure out a way to get to a lot of your audience to know how to find your book, I think you can get away with a lot. But really, I think one has to decide how far they will go, you know, because I mean the question of safety and comfort is very personal. So you have to see what you're comfortable doing. It's very easy to encourage someone to say, just write what you feel. It doesn't matter what consequences but only they know what they're willing to take in terms of consequences. But I can say that for sure, yeah, you know, you can get away with writing a lot in book forms. I mean, that's my experience in Tanzania.
Yeah, maybe to contribute to what is just said, my experience writing for the last 2 decades, I've received a lot of threats. Because in Zambia, first of all, we got independence in 1964. We were ruled by the British. They left. And then our own people came into the political space. And they started doing things. And they started drawing the country backwards. So from that time to date, creatives in Zambia and any other place in Africa have raised voices against certain vices. It could be corruption, it could be injustices against women and children, it could be the way they are running economies. Like for instance, 2 months ago, we just kicked out a regime that was led by Mr. Edgar Lungu. They were extremely corrupt, and I was one of the vocal persons criticizing the government. Almost on a daily basis, especially towards the end of their tenure, I would receive threats. I have other investments in mobile money, and at some points, cadres, political cadres would uproot my businesses because I had made a comment on Facebook or some other, on TV, appear on television, which they didn't like, and they were threatening me that as soon as they get back to power, they would sort me out. That meant maybe kill me or something like that. Now, I don't know how far you can go to take those risks, but I have taken those risks. I've been lucky. I think maybe on 1 or 2 occasions I've been physically attacked. Maybe some time back when I was in the UK, I came back, my vehicle, I was in an area called Northmead. Some political cadres wanted to burn it because they said, you are too talkative, you are an enemy of the state. That's what they have described me several times. But I think as an author, my greatest responsibility is the truth. I cannot shy away from the truth. And I recognize myself as the eyes of the people who are voiceless. Like she said, she's several voices. And so my responsibility and function as an entity who is a creative is to speak for them. Because I occupy this special privilege on earth to talk about their suffering, to talk about their expressions and their journey upon this life. So this is expressed through my primary characters in my fiction, as well as my secondary characters in my fiction. And so you have to take a chance. Do not censor yourself so much, but do not defame or do not insult people. Simply say what you feel without necessarily putting yourself in a place of libel and defamation. But be prepared that maybe at some point somebody is going to say that maybe you are an enemy of the state, or they might lynch you or beat you up, but be safe.
Okay, unfortunately we have to end this now. We have snacks at the back. Before that, I want to brag a little, just a little. So you remember he mentioned the author that won the 200 and something thousand naira prize money. So last year we were in Zambia when she won. Yes. In fact, the announcement came when we were in Zambia. This year we were in Dar. The announcement came for the Nobel Prize. Yeah. So invite me next year. Okay. So I want to particularly thank the sponsors. Our sponsors are good. I can see Mary Roy here. I think there were a few others around too. Thank you very much. All this is possible because of you. And there are lots of people watching this all over the continent because we're live streaming. It's all thanks to our sponsors, our partners, and all of you here. Thank you very much for coming. This is not the end. You are going to mingle. Yes, but before you mingle, we would like our sponsors and the panelists to go for tea first, then they can come back and then every other person will follow. Please don't go. Just make noise a little, talk about activism, money, culture, anything. Just say anything. Collect phone numbers, email addresses. Whatever it is, just let's build this network. Because if we don't, nobody else will build it for us. And that's the truth. Finally, tomorrow our program is at the University of Dar at the new library hall. We're starting at 8:30 with a reception. All those handsome and beautiful faces will be there. And somebody from Uganda is looking at somebody's face there, but tomorrow we'll find out if she can approach him. So thank you very much. Our sponsors and panelists, please, you go for tea. Yeah. Thank you.